Amrit Sindhu. And then in the introduction was the Mangalacharan, which talked about the subject matter. And we looked at the famous, which is known as the Emperor verse of the NOD or Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Anivilashita Shunyam Jnanakarmadinavratam, the definition of pure devotional service. So we looked at the Swarup Lakshans, the primary requirements, and the Tathast Lakshan. So we ended over there, and today we'll start with chapter 1, and we'll see if we can also cover chapter 2. Before we start with the discussion on the chapters, I'll stop and see if there is any comments or discussion on what we have covered so far. Okay. If not, let me share my screen. Okay. So here
kind of straightforward on that.
Okay, if all of you could mute yourself, I think somebody is unmuted, so we're picking up some crosstalk. So if you can check your mic and make sure that you're muted, or maybe who can help out there. So we had a discussion on the 6 characteristics of pure devotional service, and the fact that it is completely satisfying. It's so satisfying that devotees who are engaged in the service of Krishna, they don't want anything other than service. So this is an interesting concept when it comes to the execution of bhakti, that generally when you execute a process, it's to achieve something. Like if you exercise, the end goal is that you want better physical health. If you study hard, you want to excel academically. But bhakti, the result of bhakti is more bhakti. So the process and the goal are one and the same, which is why the statement is made that they don't really need anything else. So it's not that they don't need anything. They definitely need, right? They definitely need service, but they don't need anything other than service. So how do we know the presence of bhakti in our heart? Right. So Srila Prabhupada comments that there are 5 kinds of liberation. And this you're aware of. There is the Sayujya, Salokya, Sarupya, Sarishti, and Samipya. And the devotee rejects all of them. So, what to speak of Sayujya, which is impersonal, they even reject Samipya. Samipya amongst the liberation is higher, and even higher than Samipya is Sarishti. Sarishti is having the same kind of opulence as the Lord. Samipya is living as a constant companion of the Lord, but the devotees are not interested in them because of the taste that they're getting from service. So what is that taste? So the nectar of devotion gives us 6 characteristics or effects of pure devotional service. Right? This is important for us to. So in terms of what we need to memorize, it's a technical book. So there are some things that we need to commit to our memory. The Paribhasha Sutra, Anivilashita Shunyam, that always comes in the exam. So this is a giveaway to a question in the exam. So one should memorize that verse, the verse and translation. The 6 effects of pure devotion always comes in the exam. It's one of the keys to understanding bhakti. So what are the 6 effects? So we have kleshangani. So klesha means suffering. So I'm going to request again for the devotees to mute themselves. So klesha is suffering. Agni means fire. So kleshangni is that it burns away all kinds of sufferings. And what does it leave behind? Subhada, auspiciousness. Then moksha lagu ta'akrat. So we just discussed that the devotees derive even the samipya and sarishti mukti. Then sudurlabha, very rare. And sandarandan vishesh atma, that the bliss that one experiences is incomparable. Many times, and Prabhupada says that the Vishayanand, the material bliss, if there is an ocean of Vishaya Anand, it becomes a drop in front of the ecstasy that one experiences in devotional service. And the last is Krishna Akarshani, that it is the only means to attract Krishna. Now, these symptoms appear at different stages as one advances through bhakti. So we look at each one of them a little bit deeper. So let's first look at kleshangani. So we said that it takes away suffering. In fact, what we say is, on the authority of Rupa Goswami, that it is the only thing that takes away suffering completely. Now, how do we justify that statement? Everything Rupa Goswami says, he justifies it with scriptural injunctions. So to explain that, he explains the anatomy of suffering. So what causes suffering? It is the reactions to our previous karma, sinful actions, papa. Now, what impels one to perform sinful activities? Desires, sinful desires, which is bija. What gives rise to these material desires? Avidya, ignorance. And ignorance can be at different levels. Ignorance about the difference between pious and sinful activities. Ultimately, ignorance about one's spiritual identity. So because of this avidya comes bijam, because of this ignorance comes material desires, because of the material desire, one is impelled to act sinfully, and because of that, one gets the reactions in the form of suffering. So here we see this cause and effect. Avidya, papa, bija, and then suffering. And the nature of this is that it constantly feeds upon itself. So if you look at the cycle in the middle, from avidya comes the sinful desires, bijam, and then papam, and then here we see the substates of aprarabdha and kuta. Kuta is sinful disposition. So the one path that it goes through is avidya, bija, papam, aprarabdha, and prarabdha. Right? Because of ignorance, one has sinful desires. Because of that, one performs sinful activities. Because of that, there is reactions. The reactions are earlier on in an unmanifest state, so they are known as aprarabdha. And then at an appropriate time, they manifest into actual suffering. That is prarabdha. Now, there is another thing that happens also, that these aprarabdha karma, these unmanifest reactions, also add to your sinful disposition. So now the sinful desires are being fed from two sources. One is because of avidya. You don't know what the difference between pious and impious is. You don't know your spiritual identity. So that is feeding the sinful desires. But your past sinful activities also create in you a propensity to perform more sinful activities. So, for instance, if somebody has in the past stolen, and then they feel some pleasure out of getting something for free, getting something from somebody else without having to work for it, now that disposition is buried in them, and then it manifests as desire. So another time an opportunity comes, then it will manifest as a sinful desire. It's like somebody is traveling in a bus, they leave an object. One person will take that object and give it back to the person. Other person will take the object and go away. Same situation, two people acting differently. Why? One has a sinful disposition, one has a pious disposition. So what this cycle indicates, that it's a spiral, that once one gets caught into this cycle of karma, then kleshas will happen. So the suffering, which is the kleshas, will continue to happen. So in scientific terms, they call this as a self-sustaining loop, that it's sustaining itself now. Now, this is the reason why things like prayashchit, penances, or charity can only give temporary relief, because one may be able to get relief from prarabdha karma. So somebody is suffering, you perform some penance, atonement, charity. So the manifest reactions may be appeased a little bit, but the cycle in the background is still running. Parishil Maharaj calls this the bathing of the elephant. That the elephants will bathe in the ocean, they will become clean and they'll come out, and as soon as they come out, they'll take dust and pour it over themselves and become dirty again. So the potency of devotional service is that it is the only thing that can break this cycle of suffering. So Agni is something that burns completely. If there is a plant that is growing and you cut it, there will still be the roots that will left behind, and they'll grow again. But if you set them to fire, then the roots are also burned. So that is the nature of devotional service. So this is the explanation that I gave earlier on about avidya, desire, action. What is avidya? In the 8th page, the avidya, the root avidya is about one's own identity. So even if one is performing pious activities, but from a material conception, they will still continue to suffer, because anything material is suffering sooner or later. So that is why avidya is, the root avidya is not being aware of one's identity as an eternal servant of Krishna. Now, bijam is the seed of ignorance. And this is where it is mentioned by Srila Prabhupada in the 8th page of NOD, that when a fire takes place, then the snakes are immediately attacked. Similarly, the blazing fire of Krishna consciousness is so strong that the snakes of ignorance are immediately killed. So that's the beauty of bhakti, that it does not try to break the cycle, it cuts off the root of the cycle. So if you remember that cycle, it was coming from avidya. So once that avidya becomes vidya, one becomes properly situated, then maybe that cycle will run for some time, because there is a stockpile of prarabdha that will go through kuta, bij and prarabdha, but the fuel has stopped now. It's like the fan will rotate, but the switch has been turned off. So it will rotate for some time because of the inertia, but it will eventually slow down and stop. Okay, so this is the cycle of suffering. This is from the Waves of Devotion, Dhanudhar Maharaj's book on commentary on NOD. Okay. So as you can see, that this is one of the fundamental aspects of the potency of bhakti. So it's being explained through different ways. So going back to the point of avidya, the nature of avidya is duality. That there is pleasure and there is pain. The pleasure is accepted, and the pain is rejected. Okay. So this is just a little pictorial description of, in a situation one experiences pain and there is action because of that, and the reaction to that happens at a later time. So we may not be able to correlate the reaction to the action, but based on our knowledge of the scriptures, we know. So the reaction may come after our death in subsequent lives, but the stockpile of karma continues. So one might say that as I am suffering, is my stockpile of karma reducing? And the answer is yes, but only prarabdha karma is reducing, because that is the manifest suffering. manifest klesha. There is a huge stockpile of unmanifest karma. And depending on the law of karma, it may manifest in this life or 10 lifetimes later on or 1,000,000 lifetimes later on, but it will manifest. Right? So it's like one has money in the wallet and money in the bank. So one may spend the money in the wallet, but there is money in the bank also. And eventually that aprarabdha will manifest and become prarabdha. And even before it manifests into prarabdha, it will also create the sinful disposition, kutam. It will create the desire to commit more sinful activities. Okay, so this is the cycle of prarabdha, kuta, bij, and prarabdha across many, many lifetimes. So now let's look at the effect of bhakti on suffering. So bhakti is special because it destroys each of the 4 stages of suffering. So there is unmanifest reactions, manifest reactions, sinful desires, and avidya, and ignorance. And each one of these are essentially destroyed by bhakti. So Rupa Goswami provides scriptural references of the fact that bhakti will destroy each of these 4 stages. Right? And Prabhupada quotes it, and they're all from Bhagavatam. So you can refer it. You can refer to the quotes from there. Okay, so the conclusion is that devotional service eradicates sinful reactions, prarabdha karma. It nullifies sinful desires, bijam, and most importantly, it uproots avidya, ignorance. So it is the only efficient and effective way to achieve permanent relief from all suffering. Okay. So we did an analysis on kleshangani, the first symptom of bhakti, or the first result of bhakti. That was kleshangani, which is it destroys suffering at all its stages from inception to completion. So because these topics are a little technical, I'm going to stop frequently in between to see if there is any discussion. So any questions on this so far? Understanding this cycle is very important. I'll of course share the PowerPoint with you, but if you have any questions or comments, okay, so we have Chaitanya Ras Prabhu. Please go ahead.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. So what's the or the conversion from prarabdha to aprarabdha to prarabdha? What is the trigger point, or what is the conversion, or when does it happen, or how much, what quantity happens at what time?
So this is one of those things that are the mysteries of the law of karma, that some activities bear fruit sooner and some later. Right. So in the Bhagavatam 6th canto, it said that only the 12 Mahajans really understand the intricacies of the law of karma. From a principal perspective, what we know is that if you do any activity, then it will definitely give results. What the result will be and when will it manifest, that is determined by the specifics of the law of karma.
Okay, Prabhu. Thank you, Prabhu.
Kokila Mataji, please go ahead.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu Jai Dhanarthanam, Krishna Prabhupada. Prabhu, the one of the thing Bhakti destroys is manifest reactions. Prabhu, could you please explain more on that?
So prarabdha is karma whose reaction we are actually actively suffering. And Bhakti destroys that. So one of the questions that is asked is that how can you say that Bhakti destroys prarabdha when devotees also suffer? Devotees also grow old, devotees have sickness, they die. So all these are examples of prarabdha. How can you say that Bhakti destroys prarabdha? And the understanding that is given is that if a person is out in the rain and if he's carrying an umbrella, then as far as he is concerned, the rain is not falling. So Bhakti gives that protection that perhaps there are circumstances that are interpreted as cause of suffering, but they do not actually have the same result on the devotee. So we see anecdotally cases, somebody has shared with me about a devotee's young son. He passed away. He was taking a shower, and apparently the geyser, maybe there was some malfunction in it, but it started producing carbon dioxide. And he became unconscious and eventually he passed away. A very young child, maybe 12, 13 years old. And then I was looking at the father talking about it. There was obviously a lot of grief in losing his son, but I could also see that he was taking a lot of shelter of his spiritual practices, that this was the desire of Krishna, and he was glorifying his son, that his son was executing devotional service. If it had happened to somebody else, the suffering would have been a lot more intense. So same situation, the klesha is mitigated. And the other aspect is that actually devotees, the sufferings of the devotees go down. So the nature of bhakti is, and this will get us to the next point, that it creates auspiciousness, which means that actually the suffering goes away because now you are under the control of Krishna. So you're no longer under the control of the law of karma. You're under the supervision of Krishna. So actually the suffering mitigates.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Very nice.
Rajiv Shyam Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, and Pranam. So when we talk about avidya, it's avidya, or I guess it's knowledge about the self, right? So we have instances where people become devotee, they have attained that knowledge, but then they fall down, and we associate that typically with Vaishnava Aparadha. Now, how does that situation relate here? So is that again that individual has avidya brought in again, because he typically has that knowledge, right? Like, and then he falls down and becomes a materialist. How does that situation relate to the flowchart you had shown?
It depends on the, difficult for me to comment. So I'm probably going to opt out of trying to answer this question completely, because the fall down of a devotee is an oxymoron. right? I mean, you're making a premise, stating it as a fact, and then you're asking me to answer based on that. I don't agree with your premise. So it's difficult for me to give you a convincing answer. Maybe there are temporary deviations. Like Krishna gives his protection, other devotees give protection. The nature of bhakti is that it gives protection, right? So that's what I'm saying. You're making a premise that I cannot agree with. So it's difficult for me to give you a convincing answer.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, we'll take one more question and then we'll continue. Gayatri Mataji.
Hare Krishna. Can you please explain briefly about those types of liberation that you mentioned?
So there are 5 kinds of liberation. Sayujya Mukti is what is known as impersonal liberation, that is merging into the Brahman. Then Salokya Mukti is residing on the same planet as the Lord. Sarupya Mukti is having the same form as the Lord. Samipya Mukti is being close to the Lord. And Sarishti Mukti is having the same opulences as the Lord.
And what does it mean to be close to the Lord? What does it mean?
So Samipya means that either you're part of the Lord's pastimes or you have personal association, some form of personal association. So think of it in this way that, so right now, like we're living on this Earth planet, there are billions of living entities, but there are a small group of people who are closely associating with you. So the others are Salokya. So they are on the same lok as you are. And there are a few who are Samipya, who are close to you.
And why do devotees, why do they do not want such liberation?
So that's a good question. And that's the bringing forth the sweetness of bhakti. That for devotees, their pleasure is Krishna's pleasure. Their pleasure is service to Krishna. Now, it's not that the devotees become arrogant or say, I don't want this, right? But they don't strive for it. It's just like wealth or fame. Devotees get it and they use it in Krishna's service. Prabhupada got so much of wealth, right? He was, even in the 70s, he was a multimillionaire through ISKCON. It's not that he said, oh, no, I don't want this wealth. He took all the wealth and he used it back in Krishna's service. So when the statement is made they don't want it, what it means is that they don't strive for it. What do they strive for? They strive for Krishna's service or service to other devotees, because that gives them more pleasure than anything else.
Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Okay, so I am actually going to move on because I have to finish a couple of chapters there. So Ranga Mataji and Praveen Prabhu, hold your questions. And if we have time, I'll do it. Otherwise, if you can send them to me. So now we come to Subhada. Subhada is all auspiciousness. So the first was absence of the negative. And the second is creating a positive. So Kleshangni is suffering gone. Now what happens when suffering goes? So you're in a neutral state. So Subhada is now that one now begins to experience happiness. Now Kleshangni, it typically manifests, if you remember the 8 stages of bhakti, Kleshangni typically manifests as anartha-nivriti stage, and Subhada manifests at nishtha stage, when one is steady in bhakti. So Rupa Goswami gives us an understanding of what is auspiciousness. So just like we were discussing what is suffering, this is a discussion of what is auspiciousness. And 4 qualities are given to understand what is truly auspicious. It benefits everyone. It attracts everyone. It produces good qualities. And it bestows superior happiness. And the auspiciousness that is produced by bhakti is the only one that has all these qualities. Okay, so nothing bestows saintly qualities as thoroughly as bhakti. Because if you look at it, that piety at some level becomes discriminatory. So a person who is going to give in charity will probably give charity to a Brahman, but not a Shudra, right? Because they feel that Brahman is, and Vedas enjoying that also. But the saintly qualities that develop out of bhakti, they benefit everyone. When devotees go and preach, they will preach to everyone. They will not say this is rich person, poor person, or color, etc. They will preach to everyone. So Rupa Goswami mentions that there are 3 categories of happiness. So there is Vishayanand that comes from sense gratification. There is Mukti Anand that comes from liberation. It's also known as Brahmanand. And then there is Sevanand that comes from devotional service. And then he makes this point that Brahmanand, a drop of Brahmanand is more than an ocean of Vishayanand. And then a drop of Sevanand is trillions of times more than Brahmanand. And these are notional numbers, but just to indicate that the happiness is incalculably higher when one performs bhakti. So Prabhupada explains this in page 11 and 12 of the book. And Rupa Goswami in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, he makes a little bit of detour over here, and he also says that how bhakti, it derives the conception of siddhis, because siddhis is something that materialists, they aspire for. So he talks about the Ashtasiddhis, then the 15 other kinds of siddhis, 10 major siddhis, 5 minor siddhis. But the point that he makes is that the happiness that is experienced because of the execution of bhakti, it is incalculably larger than any other form of happiness, whether it is Vishayanand or whether it is Brahmanand. So we did 2 symptoms, Kleshangini and Shubhada. Let's look at the 3rd symptom. So Sudurlabha, it is rare and difficult to attain. So why is it difficult to attain? Because we cannot obtain it by our own efforts. It only comes by the mercy of Krishna. and Krishna does not grant it easily. Why does Krishna not grant bhakti easily? Can anybody give me an answer to that? Bhakti Vinod Prabhu?
Because even if he gives that easily, then Krishna is under the control. He doesn't want to be controlled by everyone.
Very good. So Krishna gives everything else easily, right? He gives bhukti easily, he gives mukti, but bhakti is careful, because then he is inviting the person to his own house. Other things he is giving, okay, you take it. Somebody comes to your door, he says, give me some bhukti, I need to enjoy. Krishna says, okay, take some money, go away. Another person comes, knocks on the doors, give me liberation. Krishna puts it in his hand, go away. Third person comes, give me bhakti. Now Krishna has to open the door and say, you come into my house now, right? And that's why Krishna does not give it easily, which also means that it is sudurlabha. Firstly, it cannot be done on its own. So it only comes by, and when we speak about Krishna's mercy, we speak about devotees' mercy also. Okay.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Please take some advice. Prabhu, I had a quick question.
Prabhu, can you please?
Sorry.
We just want to follow the format, Prabhu. Otherwise, it will be difficult.
Okay, no problem.
Thank you. So we did Kleshangni, we did Sudurba, we did what was the second one that we did? Subhada, and then we are doing Sudurlabha, that it is difficult to attain, right? So a devotee might ask this question, that if bhakti is bestowed upon us, if it is only the mercy of Krishna, then why do we have to work so hard at it? And the answer, so the example that is given is that if one wins a lottery ticket, then I was reading in the news that there was somebody in California, he won a $2 billion lottery ticket, right? And why did he win it? Because he bought the lottery ticket. Now, what he won and what he put in, there's no comparison. He put in $1 or whatever the lottery tickets cost, he got $1 billion, $2 billion. But if he had not bought that ticket, he would not have won it. So what Krishna gives us is billions and trillions of dollars. But at least we need to put that $1 effort. So that $1 effort that we put in is we show Krishna our sincerity. And we show Krishna our sincerity by saying that we are ready to receive your mercy. So we purify our heart and make it a receptacle capable of holding Krishna's mercy. I like the wording of this, that if you think of mercy as being offered as an amritam, then our heart that is dirty, it will contaminate that also. But what we do is that we clean it and make it ready. So this we discussed. Why doesn't Krishna give it easily? Because it has the power to control him. We see how Yashoda Mai is controlling Krishna. Krishna in Vrindavan is almost entirely controlled by his devotees, by his parents, by his friends, by the gopis. Almost everybody there is pushing Krishna around, and Krishna is happy about it. Okay, so let me pause over here and see if you have any comments. Prabhu, do you want to ask the question?
Yeah, Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Like I mentioned in the chat, if bhakti is difficult and Krishna doesn't give Bhakti, when he has proposed Sharanagati, right, in chapter 18 of Bhagavad Gita, what is the difference?
What is the word?
Sharanagati.
Okay, I'm still not following you.
Sharanagati.
You know, Sharanagati.
Yes.
So Krishna also says, Lord Krishna says, if Sharanagati is the way to also come to him, right? If not Bhakti.
It's an anga of bhakti. So what is Sharanagati, right? Taking shelter of Krishna.
Yes, shelter of Krishna, but you know, if we are not able to please Krishna through our process of bhakti, then and if he's not able to accept it, then what is the alternative?
Oh, I see what you mean. It's a good question, Prabhu. We'll actually talk about this either later today or next week. That if you're not able to, and we are in that state, you know, we can relate to that. If you're not able to develop that sense of wanting to please Krishna, or maybe we have that sense of wanting to please Krishna, but not the motivation, what do we do? Right, and we'll talk about so either today or next week your question will be answered.
Thank you.
Bhakti Vinod Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. So that question which Rajiv Shyam Prabhu asked, I was thinking of the example of Bharat Maharaj, right? He was at the bhava stage, and because of the aparadh he did, which was unmanifested at that time, then the prarabdha comes, and then so the cycle, because he was at the bhava stage and he falls down. So I'm just understanding the whole cycle from avidya to, I forget now, to bija, and then kuta, and then papam, and then
But personalities like Bharat Maharaj, they are there to give us teachings, right? And the matter of fact is that the fall down of Bharat Maharaj is temporary. So is it actually a fall down? Right? Did he actually get covered by avidya? Because if he did, then why would he, if he was covered by avidya, then why would he as a deer maintain his full Krishna consciousness? Why would he as Jat Bharat be fully absorbed in Krishna consciousness? Right? So, yeah, I mean, let's not confuse matters over here. I want to keep it simple over here.
okay, thank you, Prabhu.
Yes, Chaitanya Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. So my thought was going where when we talked about that cycle, that bijam kutam and prarabdha karma, is that limited to sins, or is it limited to or does it include even offenses, or is it like both included in that cycle, or only the sins included in that cycle?
It's a material cycle. Aparadhs don't come in that category.
Oh, okay.
Right, aparadh is in the category of offenses in bhakti. There's a chapter for that. We'll cover that, but this is not in that category.
Okay, thank you, Prabhu.
Okay, so we'll take one more question and then stop after that. Rajiv Shyam Prabhu.
So follow up to Chaitanya Prabhu's point there. Like, so where does punya come into the picture in that cycle, Prabhu? So if we do suffering, I understand, I guess, is it reducing by decreasing the papam?
It does not decrease papam. So punyam also goes through the same cycle. Because remember when we were doing karma in Bhagavad Gita, what did we say? That all karma is, what did we say? All karma is?
Temporal.
What?
Temporary.
No, what we said was all karma is bad karma.
Oh,
Yeah, whether it is pious or impious, it is all bad karma. Because why? Ultimately, it results in taking another birth.
okay.
Right. So, your observation is correct that just like impious activities, they condition a person to perform sinful activities. Similarly, pious activities condition the person to perform more pious activities. There, right? And those pious activities will also bind the person. Prabhupada would say that don't be attached to one laddu. You'll come back to taste that laddu. So, from a spiritual perspective, the cycle of karma, whether pious, impious, it is both binding. It is both coming from avidya. If I am going around giving people charity with the hope that it will create better opportunities for me, still avidya. It's still coming from a material conception.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, good questions. Moving on. Okay, so we talk about the happiness in bhakti. Now we talk about the next symptom of bhakti is Sri Krishna Akarshani. So Sri Krishna Akarshani, as the name indicates, that it attracts Krishna. Again, Krishna is all attractive, but he is attracted by the process of bhakti. And the reason that Krishna gets attracted, because it is establishing the jiva in its original constitutional position. It's like the father had a son and the son left the house and forgot that I have a father. When the son starts remembering the father, then the father's attention gets focused on the son again. The father was always looking at the son, but now that the son is remembering that, okay, this is my father. So the father is now hopeful. Now the son will come back to my house. So this is the only means to attract the attention of Krishna. There is no other means. There is no amount of austerities or penances or yagyas that one can perform that would attract the attention of Krishna in the way that bhakti does. We see that in the life of Srila Prabhupada, that against odds that were immeasurably difficult, old age, no money, traveling to a foreign country, right? If somebody, in retrospect, it looks like it was destined to happen. But then if you move back and look at it from, you put yourself in Prabhupada's position, then can you imagine the amount of confidence that you would need to have to be able to execute what Prabhupada did? But at every step, Prabhupada was helped by Srila Prabhupada. So that brings us to the end of chapter 1. So we did the 6 symptoms of bhakti. Now, one of the things that I do want to point out is that if you look at the 6 symptoms, 3 of them have to do with happiness or are related to happiness, right? There is subhada, which is found in the sadhana stage of bhakti, when one is doing sadhana, at the Nishta stage, as you mentioned. There is Subhada, which is happiness. Then there is Moksha Laguta Akrat. This is found at Bhava stage. When one is feeling so much happiness in executing devotional service, that the happiness that comes out of liberation is insignificant. And the last one is which we did not speak much about, is the Sandra Anand Visheshatma. So Sandra Anand Visheshatma, which is the sixth symptom of bhakti, is concentrated and intense bhakti, which is only experienced at the stage of prema. So we see that what bhakti does is that it continuously, it increases our happiness from Shubhada to Moksha Laguta to Sandranand Vishesh Atma. So this brings us to the end of the first chapter. And I think, as usual, we went over time. We won't be able to do the second chapter, but we have a couple of minutes left. So if anybody has any closing thoughts, we can discuss that. Okay. If not, then we'll end here. I'll share
Vamshi Prabhu has a question, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. The question I have, Prabhu, like you say, like Krishna has to grant the bhakti. So we also know that the devotee's mercy, right? It's Vaishnava's mercy also. So as Vaishnava's mercy awakened the dormant stage of devotees, or if he's not a devotee also, they can change the heart of the person and become a devotee. So
your question is that will a devotee's mercy bestow bhakti on another person, or can a non-devotee's mercy also bestow bhakti?
No, Prabhuji. I think, yeah, with the devotee's mercy bestow on the non-devotee.
Right.
Meaning if not devotee and is not at all God conscious, but with the devotee mercy, we can make him a devotee or not.
That's how all of us came to Krishna consciousness, right? We were all, or at least I can talk about myself and a lot of people I know, that we were, or I was essentially a non-devotee, and went to the temple, got the mercy of a devotee, and because of that, was able to make some progress. So I would extend the question that you said to emphasize that only through the mercy of devotees can the non-devotees become favorable to Krishna consciousness. There is no other way. Only through the mercy of the devotees. So even though we say over here Krishna's mercy, but Krishna is also, Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur, he comments on this in Madhurika Damni, that Krishna cannot give his mercy because then he will be accused of partiality. If he gives his mercy to you and not to me, then I'll go and complain that why did Vamshi Gopal Prabhu get it and why didn't I get it? You're supposed to be samhom sarvbhuteshu, supposed to be the same to everybody. So Krishna does not give his mercy directly, but he gives his mercy to his devotees. And then he lets them distribute the mercy in the way that they choose to do so. So that it's the devotees of Krishna who go around approaching the non-devotees and bestowing mercy. That's the only way that they receive mercy. Is that okay, Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhu. I think there is still some confusion, meaning not in your answer, but sometimes I also came mercy of the devotee, but I also see maybe there is from my previous karma, which I have to use it for bhakti, but somebody has become an instrument to bring it to Krishna. Versus there are somebody that never become a devotee, even the highest devotee bestow the mercy. I don't know, meaning it's a little more deeper, but I am not sure how do I understand it.
Yeah, I mean, there could be different situations. Like there may be what is known as purva rag, right? There may be people who had been practicing bhakti in their previous lives, and because they were not able to complete it, they take another birth. They still wait for the mercy. So Prabhupada gives the example of dry wood and wet wood. That they have already gone through some process of bhakti, they're dry. And as soon as they get the spark of the mercy, they immediately light. And there are some who have not. It's like wet wood. You light a fire, still does not light. Light a fire, still does not light, and eventually they light. So different situations are possible, but the unifying factor is that it's the mercy of the devotee that gives that impetus, whether to remind the person or to start the process in a person.
Thank you.
Okay, Rangamataji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Pranams. So, Prabhuji, as devotees, like when you explained about giving bhakti to others is possible only through devotees, which I completely agree through the experience as well. So, my question is, going through all these lessons today, as practicing or aspiring devotees, at least speaking to myself, I might be doing knowingly, unknowingly, a lot of mistakes, and I might be accumulating sins and aparadhas, right? So would that have an impact on the, on the process of giving bhakti to others?
Certainly. If you go back to the analogy that I was quoting from Prabhupada, that giving bhakti is like lighting the fire of devotion. So it depends on how strong your fire is. There are people who met Srila Prabhupada just once, and they left everything and took to devotional service. They had no understanding, they had no background, who's Krishna, whatever it is. Prabhupada was walking down the street, Hayagriva Swami was walking on the other way, and just stopped and said hello, and the process started, and gave his life for Prabhupada. Potency of Prabhupada, right? Perhaps you and I, we may not have that potency, so it takes more effort. So certainly, how well are we practicing it at our end? How strongly is the flame of bhakti in us? That also determines how effectively can we give it to others.
So the others understanding bhakti is two-way. One is how strong we are in our sadhana, plus how much open and how much interested they are in it. So it's a combined effect, right, Prabhuji?
You're right. To start them off, I mean, I have personal experience where I have encouraged people to take to bhakti, and within no time they have really become very, very strong in devotion, much stronger than I am, right? So at least to start off, yes, that your potency and their receptivity matters. Once they start the process of bhakti, then it becomes a relationship between them and Krishna and devotional service. Who do they take shelter of? Then they're on their own path.
Thank you, Prabhuji.
Okay, so we'll take one last question. We have Bhakti Vinod Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, just the one thing that, would you be able to send the PowerPoints of the introduction and preface too, while you send for chapter 1?
So what I will send today is introduction and preface and chapter 1 combined.
Okay, thank you, Prabhu.
The PowerPoint, yeah. Okay, very good. We're a little over time. So for the next discussion, if you can read chapter 2 and chapter 3. Chapter 3 is a small chapter. So please read chapter 2 and 3. Okay, we'll end here. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Ananta koti vaishnavinda ki jai. Shila Prabhupada ki jai. Thai Gaur.